Thomas Merton, a theologian and mystic, in one of his books writes, "We may spend our whole life climbing the ladder of success, only to discover that when we get to the top, our ladder is leaning against the wrong wall." The main theme of the season of Lent is return to the Lord, namely to see against which wall the ladder is leaning and then to place it on the right wall. However, returning to the Lord is possible only when we are prepared to go through the process of self-realization, which involves knowing where we are and where we want to go. Without self-realization, it is not possible to return to the Lord. One of the most fascinating and inspiring stories in the Bible is the return of the prodigal son to his father. Blinded by his own ego, the young man clung to his possessions and pleasures of this world and chose to be cut off from the life-giving relationships, and finally he landed up in misery. In this entire period of wandering around in the outer world, the ego blinded him to his inner reality. But the beauty of the story is that he returns to his father and to his home when he realizes who he is and where he has landed. The Gospel of Luke chapter 15 verses 11 to 32 highlights the fact that the young man came to his senses and then he returns to his father. For Christians, the 40 days of Lent is a time to dismantle their ego and realize their true self, created in the image and likeness of God. Self-realization is a must for every human being and not just for Christians. It is a tedious journey one undertakes toward one's true self. It is awakening to the truth within, to see ourselves as God sees us. Journeying around in the outer world may be tempting, but to live a fuller and meaningful life, one needs to plunge within to discover the pearl of great price. Nevertheless, the inward journey is both intense and painstaking. Sant Kabir in one of his poems says, "Tera sai tujh mein hai, tu jaag sake to jaag," meaning divine power is within you. Awaken to this truth if you can. The root cause of all darkness in humans is the ignorance of their true self, or being blind to their own inner reality. The ignorance leads us to identify ourselves with the physical and material aspects of our existence, and when we identify ourselves with our body, we forget our true nature and develop an ego which is limited, fearful, greedy, and narcissistic. It is our ignorance that makes us convinced that the ego is our true self. Furthermore, the ego makes us believe that power, pleasures, and possessions of this world can make us happy. The problem is that as long as we identify ourselves with our body, we continue to live in bondage or maya. Sometimes our identification with the ego is so strong that moving away from our ego makes us insecure, as though we are going to lose a part of ourselves. True, to realize the true self, the ego needs to die. Therefore, self-realization is a process of dethroning our ego and enthroning our true self. And meditation is found to be one of the effective strategies to go through the process of self-realization, which gradually helps us to remove ignorance and see our true self clearly. As Jesus says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." John chapter 8 verse 31. From the beginning of his life, Jesus was conscious in the depth of his being, of his divinity. All the same, he allowed himself to have all human experience while being divine. Luke chapter 2 verse 52 tells us that Jesus grew to self-realization through the process of living with all the joy and pain that human beings go through. Saint Teresa of Avila, in the process of her inward journey, had a profound self-realization. She saw her soul as an interior castle made of a single diamond, or a very clear crystal in which there are many rooms, just as in heaven there are many mansions. She believed the soul of the righteous man is nothing but a paradise in which God takes delight. Her understanding was that the beauty of the soul is not inherent in the psyche, but is derived from the Master who dwells within and is a reflection of his beauty within. The self-realization of Saint Teresa of Avila inspires us to see and understand that every human soul is beautiful because it is made in the image and likeness of God. But if the same soul is separated from God, it is nothing. I am good and beautiful precisely because I am a mirror that reflects the goodness and beauty of Christ who dwells within me. And Christ in turn reflects the goodness and beauty of the Father, for he is the image of the invisible God. Colossians chapter 1 verse 15. St. Paul gives us an account of his inner journey and the struggle he went through before he realized his true self. After his conversion on the road to Damascus, he sets out on his journey to find himself and begins his journey of self-realization with a question, "Who are you, Lord?" Acts chapter 9 verse 5. In finding Jesus Christ, gradually he finds himself, his true self. Initially he struggles to understand himself and the duality that lies within. He painfully realizes he has two separate selves within himself. One, the inmost self, and the other in his members. He writes, "For in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work in me." Romans chapter 7 verse 22 and 23. Having found his inmost self, Paul struggles to act from his real self and to be liberated from the law of evil as he expresses helplessness. "Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death?" Romans chapter 7, 24-25. Having realized his true self, the next thing that Paul does is he willingly dies to his false self so that he can live now for Christ alone. He says, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." Galatians chapter 2 verse 20. Sometime or the other, we all have to undertake an inward journey in order to realize our fuller self, which we may call a journey toward wholeness. When there is a calling from within, we need to embark on this journey. The reason for our inward journey is a realization that there is more to life than eating, working, enjoying and sleeping. And we have the potential to evolve our consciousness to the highest level where we can come to face with our real self. To do so, we need to go beyond the confines of our mind and body and enjoy a state of being which is independent of mind and body. Expanding our consciousness is the only way to realize the inner reality. Therefore, let's keep going and continue the process of discovering the treasure within.